So in this stream, I'm hoping to take you along with me live as I'm working on some initial concepts for a client. So if I share my screen, I'll let you see what I've come up with so far. And I'll explain a little bit about this client. So some rough sketches are yet to come. I've started looking at some fonts I quite like the look of. The name of this brand is the Royal Pooch Boutique, which I quite like. And if I share this PDF, you can see just a little sneak peek at my process for brand naming. So I looked at synonyms for the word dog. We thought pooch was quite nice. Synonyms for quality, and we have a little think of a meaning behind this, what kind of thoughts it would conjure up in a client's mind and in a client's customer's mind. And there were a few options I proposed. The canine collection, that was quite nice. That was a contender, but we decided to go for Royal Pooch Boutique, and I think we'll use V. V sounds quite nice. V, Royal Pooch Boutique. So there we are. That's the mission. And I promised, rather than just sharing an overview of what I've already done, I would stream live so that you can see what really happens. A day, a week in the life of a graphic designer, and you can see how this really looks in reality. So I like to block off a little period of time so I'm not interrupted, and then I'm able to really pick up some momentum and work through these concepts. So this is what I've arrived at so far. I quite like these ideas. Some of these typefaces are really nice. I think they're really hitting the tone that I'm looking for. It's a possibility of a monogram and maybe a simplified version of the logo that plays on the monogram. So I really like this for this particular font. There's such a nice kind of symmetry here, and it almost looks as if the leg of the R flows into the bow of the P here. So some interesting options already. And then down here, some further options I was exploring. I quite like this. I don't usually go for lowercase titles for logos, but in this case, it lines up so perfectly. The Y just fills this little gap that's created in the lowercase version of the word pooch. Really, really comes together well. So some options I've explored along those lines. And then I was also exploring some more modern looking options. Something quite minimalist, light, elegant, but modern. And this kind of exploration I'm doing here, I think is exactly the kind of thing you can't do this with a template. Sometimes I've seen on Etsy and other sites, there's logo templates. Pick a font you like, throw your brand name in. You can't create something like this from a template. When you're balancing the tracking and kerning between each letter, you're creating a really tight lockup like this. When you're exploring, I think in particular these kind of options, I love this idea here, reversing the I of boutique and having it frame this perfectly. There's no template that's going to do that for you. So personally, I tend to, depends on the project. For this one, I'm exploring the type first of all, and I think quite likely there may be a symbol or at least a monogram that goes along with this. For this brand, it's quite important they have a symbol they can reproduce on items of. It's going to be a range of dog clothing, accessories. So it's quite important they have a little recognizable symbol that they can use. But I've decided to start off with the type in this case. I'll also show you, if I switch over to Talking Head, you may notice a few changes to my office since the last video. So there's now a second chair if I move over. And my wife is very much the interior designer. She lets me know I'm just the graphic designer. That's where my design jurisdiction ends. So there's a nice comfy little kind of lounge area behind me. And I think because this camera, it has such a wide depth of field, everything looks in focus. So I think it can look quite strange. It looks like I'm almost sitting with a chair on either shoulder at times. But yeah, that's the reality of my office and the setup here. Let's go back to screen sharing. And one last thing I'll show you before I crack back on with the initial concepts. I'll flick through the research and strategy. If you're watching this back, I'm not sure anyone will be able to join live because I've quite spontaneously jumped into this. I didn't realize I'd be streaming this today. So if you want to pause, if you're watching this back, I'll just spend a few moments on each page. You can catch up and have a look at the research and the strategy I've proposed for this brand. That's an important page. And this page is really, I deliberately display it in this manner. So you've got the most important, the core messages toward the left, and then it kind of tails on. And some of these supporting messages, I've mentioned this in my classes before, these may come across as literal messages on a website. They could come across in the stock imagery that's used, even the style of photography. But these messages, we're definitely looking at communicating these in the tone and the feel of the logo. Some literal elements. If I may just explore, I might get out the iPad and do a little sketching, although I don't think I'll live stream that. And I won't sit for the next 6-7 hours working just on this. I tend to give myself maybe 2-3 hour blocks. I'll work on one project, but then I'll swap over to work on something else. But I'm going to keep this stream fairly short. I won't work through, I'm not going to share everything I do for the next kind of hour or so remaining, but just to give you an idea of my process in practice while I'm working on it. So really like some of the ideas we've got so far, and just feel free to follow along. Hopefully you pick something up maybe as you see me do this. I'm not going to give a running commentary, but feel free to to kind of just enjoy this peek over my shoulder, as it were, and let's see what we can come up with. So I'm still going to have a look at type mainly and just try to nail the tone. I think the options we've covered already. There's something quite traditional and classic, and something that's pushing to look quite modern and minimalist. So let's see what we can come up with here. already I think this has got quite a nice feel to it. Could look at removing the gap and possibly putting one of the words in a bolder version of a font, but no, in this case I don't think that works. Now V definitely looks unbalanced when it sits off the center of that space, so that is something I'll need to address. Stressing the word royal seems to work a little better. Yeah, and you may have noticed what happened there. Because we've got such wide spacing, tracking rather, on this, which is still live text, you can see that space, it stretches way to the end of the, past the E here. And it means if you rely on the centering and snapping that's built into Illustrator, it's going to be centering it to include that massive gap on the end. So I always drag a few blocks in. It doesn't have to be perfect while we're exploring concepts, but that was miles off of being correctly centered. Something similar happened to Boutique. So even with the grid lines, I tend to use the grid lines to help with other things, more with the creation of symbols and other elements, but I find dragging these shapes in, that's the easiest way to kind of visually balance things and make sure the positioning is correct. I quite like that. As far as the type's concerned, Royal is really stressed nicely. It's a very elegant, luxurious feel to that line of text. V could perhaps be even smaller. That's really not an important part of this. And then we have Boutique. Perhaps just increase the spacing and bring that down. Don't want it to be overly prominent. Yeah, that's quite nice. So in terms of tone, I think this is potentially a winner. Who knows what we might do in future to customize this, to perhaps make it bespoke or unique. But when you're just exploring initial concepts for kind of direction you want to head, you're looking at tone, you're looking at the overall feeling it gives you, and you're looking at how well these different elements meet the brief. So in terms of type, I think this is meeting the brief really well. And then who knows, if there is a symbol that could sit as part of the overall logo lockup, and that symbol could be positioned to sit with, to complement the type. It may be that we lose V, and then a symbol of some form kind of sits up here, or maybe V can stay. I don't know what shape, what dimensions the symbol might have, but something like that could work as well. So I know some designers will start sketching out the symbol. I've done it in reverse this time. I find it's easier to nail the tone of the type I'll be using, and then I'll explore the symbol separately. So that looks quite good. I do like the tone there. Really like this option, and iterations are key. Trying I won't do another iteration of this because I don't think there's much more to explore. I could duplicate it across, but I already know if I have it all regular, it's just a bit too difficult to read and to differentiate these words. What I could do is use a different tone to separate them. So that would be an option. I keep it in black and white at this stage, but perhaps there could be, two complementary colors working here, and that enables us not to have this uncentered space, which really bothers me. I'd want V to sit kind of perfectly in that space, but it can't because then it's off center. So definitely favoring options if we have the title all on one line where we've removed the space. So actually, yeah, that was another iteration worth exploring. But as I looked back up here, I just wondered, was there something else we could do? I just really like this symmetry. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but to me it's almost like a ribbon that's flowing in and up and back down and up again. Really do like that. So perhaps if I borrow this and bring it down to this artboard here. Don't need the background at this stage. I wonder what else could work. At times it's good to explore symmetry. So if a brand name is the Royal Pooch Boutique, I think R and P would be good letters to stress for the monogram to make it recognizable. But of course you could do something where you reflect. Sometimes symmetry creates like really interesting patterns. You can see what happens if we reflect for P. And that looks too much like a 9. Reflected P looks like a 9, but you get the idea. As you kind of just play and don't be afraid to fail, to try an option that pops into your head. Sometimes it won't work, or as is the case here, it now looks like either a 9 or of course a lowercase q. It doesn't work, but I try as many iterations as I can. I won't keep all of the failed iterations on my artboard. I tend to delete them down as I go along, and what I'm left with is at least an exploration of things that potentially work. Sometimes for a client's benefit, if I'm sharing this process document, it's actually worth including some of the failed options so that they can see what worked but also what didn't, if that's something they'll be curious about. So let's bench that for now. This is quite interesting. Yeah, this is, maybe I'll leave it here just so the client can see it was explored, but these kind of rounded, I think this is, yeah, all-round Gothic, dosis. Not the right tone for this brand. I'm kind of leaning towards a serif for that classic luxurious feel, and especially because we've used the word royal, and I think we were considering conveying the fact this is a British based brand. We want it to be international and global, but I think we were going to play on that kind of British foundation. So British, royal, what kind of font does that conjure up in your mind? I think it's a more classic font, a serif definitely. I've explored some modern options, but let's try another classic. maybe this one. So if you watch this live stream back, let me know in the comments how this differs from your method. If you're just starting out, you've nailed the the brief, the strategy, and you're ready to start creating, what do you begin with first? Do you start with the type? Do you get sketching? Do you look for inspiration? And interestingly, if these go across 2 lines, it is possible to line them up by tweaking the spacing just a little. If the spacing's tight, I think it would become obvious when one differs from the other. Not too obvious. If the spacing for both is wider, I'm not sure with this font that wide spacing is going to work. But I feel with that wider spacing, much less obvious that we've kind of stretched Royal a little to better fit with Pooch. And at this early stage, I don't really want to be fine-tuning. It's a little bit of a bad habit. I tend to spend a bit too long trying to perfect concepts that may not be used. Really, this is something that can happen when you've selected a concept and then you're fine-tuning and developing it. But it's a good chance to share, I guess, this technique. So the serif of a H is actually making the H end much further out than the L, and here they both have serifs, so it's not a problem. But to my eye, this lines up much better. It looks far more crisp than if I extended the L and I had both letters end there. So to me, optically, that's correct. That's now perfectly lined up. Better with space. And then boutique, so again, do we line up to the serif? We've got a sans serif B. Do we line up to the serif of the P? Or to the kind of main sans serif element of the letter? And I'm pretty confident it's going to look better. Yeah, that looks better to me again. I think ignoring the serif and kind of lined up to this real bulky stem that we have here. An interesting option could be removing the serifs. That could be interesting. It doesn't work just removing the ends, but if I spent some time and I actually took the serifs away from these letters, that could be cool. And that would straight away give us a unique font. So maybe some options if we select this, if we go down this route. So at this stage we don't have to use V. If we realise this looks great on itself, then we may not include V as part of the logo. This is a similar lockup, but using just sans serif, kind of modern type. And yeah, V, it complicates it. I'm not sure it's adding something. It's worth us having. Okay, so I'm feeling good. I feel like I've got some fairly varied options for the type. They're resonating well with me. I think for the chosen brand name, there's a really nice synergy there. For Royal Pooch Boutique. So we may not need to add a symbol. It could be we take some of the letters that are already present in the logo type, and that becomes the symbol, the brand mark for this brand. But I'd like to explore all the options. I don't want to create something that's cliched. I think for pet brands you often see like a paw print or a tail. I'd like to do something, this is meant to be quite an elegant, refined brand, so I'd like to do something a little less obvious. I will explore that. I think I'm going to end the live stream here. I'm going to go away, have a look, find some inspiration now with a view to developing a symbol I'm happy with. It's always good to see what others have done, draw some inspiration from that, and then come and try it, and try employing those ideas in a different way. You can't copy. There's such a big difference between copying and drawing inspiration. And perhaps that's something I could cover in that could be quite a good Skillshare class. The difference between inspiration and just sheer plagiarism. But I won't live stream that. I may cover that in a video kind of looking back at this process. But I wanted to share this just to jump on a live stream, because I think it's such an important foundation, and I already feel a fair bit of the journey in exploring the logo concepts has been accomplished here. Just spending some time exploring the fonts, the tones. This is a large part of the job, and then I find I'll usually spend a lot more time exploring things I may or may not use, exploring symbols, and that comes later, and that combines with what I've done here. But that's it, shared live in real time. This is the foundations of exploring the initial concepts. So I hope you've enjoyed this little peek behind the scenes, and don't be a stranger. Leave some comments, share with me what you do first of all when you're approaching a new project and your first concepts, and please let me know what you thought of this. Otherwise, hope you enjoy your week, and see you soon.